Hey everyone, it's Ed Gutowski. What I wanted to do was to create a quick video which helps us to better understand how rhetoric and argument works. So one of the things that I've enjoyed in this week is really kind of reading students' comments over how they defined rhetoric, and our class overwhelmingly likes to use the word persuade as part of their definition of rhetoric. But it's week 2, so I'm going to maintain my definition of rhetoric. And my definition of rhetoric is still words that are used to manipulate, deceive, and con someone. And what we'll do in the next couple of weeks is we'll kind of put that definition of rhetoric to the test and talk about rhetoric as the ability to persuade. Rhetoric, is it used to mislead, deceive, con people, and if there's a difference between those two terms. But what I wanted to do today was just to kind of create a quick video where I add our next understanding of rhetoric and argument. So rhetoric and argument use 3 things, and these 3 things are logos, pathos, and ethos. And if I was teaching a ground class, what I would do is I'd have students write down these 3 terms and ask them what do they think these 3 terms mean. And just kind of look at the word, what do you think it means? Some of you may be familiar with these words, some of you may have never heard these words before, that's fine. But I think we need to break down what these 3 terms mean. So if we look at the word logos, and I love when students come up with, because sometimes students come up with the term, they look at the word logos and they think facts, they think statistics, and sometimes students actually look at the word and they think logo. And I like that idea of rhetoric using logo. But rhetoric, notice, it looks like and it sounds like logic. So rhetoric is an appeal to logic. And that would make sense. If you want to define rhetoric as the ability to persuade, well, I'm going to use facts. I'm going to use statistics. I'm going to use logic. So, and I'll talk about how a logo can kind of play into rhetoric in a second. But logos is an appeal to logic. Well, then the second term underneath those, notice, is pathos. And pathos is an appeal to emotion. And if you want to accept my definition of rhetoric as words used to manipulate, deceive, and con people, well, it would make sense that we'd want to appeal to emotion. We'd want to use pathos because we're all emotional beings. If you think about how advertisements work, right, they're always appealing to our emotions. So, and sometimes I try to use the word P to think of like passion. Okay, how can I remember? Because logos looks like logic, sounds like logic, it's logic. Pathos, okay, that P, someone who's passionate. Someone who's passionate, right, would be very excited about what they're doing. So that's a way to remember emotion. I also think of something like if you're an NFL fan and you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. Well, the Pittsburgh Steelers are 5-2 and they have the most passionate fans wearing their yellow towels. Or if you're a Patriots fan, you're all sad because the Patriots are terrible. But either which way, pathos stands for emotion. Now, ethos is the one that students oftentimes confuse, right? Because it begins with an E, right? And so sometimes they'll say ethos is emotion. Ethos is not emotion. Pathos is emotion. Ethos is, you can define ethos in 3 ways, okay? So ethos is character or authority. Credibility, character, or authority. Now, sometimes ethos can be defined as morals and ethics. I won't define ethos as morals and ethics because towards the end of the term, we're going to get into a specific argument called stasis theory that looks at the moral and ethical issues and arguments. So ethos becomes an appeal to character and authority. And sometimes students go, well, what does that mean? Well, sometimes I give the example of, would you rather have this class be taught by me or a Harvard professor? And I always think a Harvard professor would be a great professor to teach this class, right? Because Harvard is probably the greatest institution in our country, right? And a Harvard professor has great ethos, great character. But sometimes students say, no, I wouldn't want to have a Harvard professor because the ethos of a Harvard professor is he's hard or he's demanding. And sometimes you might think of ethos as character and authority if you think of advertisements, right? Advertisements always use someone's character and authority. So if you think about Nike, Nike uses the ethos of Michael Jordan. Why do they use Michael Jordan's character? Because he's the greatest basketball player of all time. So ethos is an appeal to character and authority. So I just wanted to kind of do a basic review of introducing how rhetoric and argument are linked. They're linked by logos, which appeal to logic, pathos, which appeal to emotion, and ethos appeal to character authority. There's an additional video you can watch to help you understand these terms, and there's a discussion board in which you can kind of pick which one do you think is the best one to use. And I look forward to seeing what you have to say.